Hillbilly Elegy is also known as Song of the Desperate. This is an autobiographical memoir that uses words to show the real and fragmented picture of American society, and deeply explores the difficulties and crises faced by the American blue-collar class. A book that captures the feelings of despair and tenacity at the bottom level, not only the United States, but also the despair and resilience of the bottom class all over the world. This book tells the story of two migrations. One was the mass movement of poor white people, including the author's grandparents, from rural Appalachia to the towns of the Rust Belt. The other is that Vance went from one of those places, Middletown, Ohio, to the geography and demographics of the ruling class, New Haven, Silicon Valley, Washington. To some extent, Hillbilly Elegy is a narrative of struggle, a chronicle of a young man's rise in the face of adversity, and it can be read as a vindication of the status quo. Sitting in a relatively privileged position, the imaginary reader takes comfort in the knowledge that this ambitious Ohioan has arrived in a privileged position, pulls out a chair and sits down, fascinated by his journey along the way. This story is harrowing but also inspiring. Vance's childhood was clouded by this struggle because of his mother's opioid addiction, but he was saved by his loving grandparents, especially his sharp-tongued, tenacious grandmother, whose portrayal is the book's most memorable literary achievement. His grandmother, a career in the Marines, and his time at Ohio State University took the young Vance away from Middletown and gave him the confidence and skill to write Hillbilly Elegy. Yale provided him with connections, the most influential of which was his mentor Amy Kua, a contracted professor who authored the Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mother, other books. The author J.D. Vance is an authentic American countryman. He was 32 years old when he published the book. He haven't done anything earth-shattering either, but his memoirs were criticized by Bill Gates, Peter Thiel, and other Silicon Valley elites are paying close attention. Aliapo 10 New York Times and Amazon bestseller lists. Nearly a year. Bill Gates says this is a great book. Important social issues. He discussed it far more than Vance could have imagined when he wrote this book. Turn out to Beth's book not only explains the rise of Trump, it also reveals the deep-seated social problems in the United States. Ted is between the poor and mainstream society. Deeper and deeper. Estrangement. Vance was born in a poor mountainous area in the American Midwest. Growing up in a declining steel town, his mother is a drug addict. Father gave up custody of him early. Few members of Vance's entire family went to college, but with his own efforts, admitted to Yale Law School. Became a high school classmate, the only person admitted to an Ivy League school. Behind such an inspiring story, but it's the economic recession throughout the Midwestern United States, and the anxiety and despair of the local white working class. After the U.S. industrial economy moved south, fewer local job opportunities and many pawn shops have closed down. More white kids like Vance, who come from lower classes, can only stay in a poor family. Their family conflicts continue. Children may drop out of school early or die from drugs. People here no longer believe as long as you work hard at a better life. They give up and are even hostile to the American dream. In the 2016 U.S. election, 67% of lower-class whites voted for Trump. Hillary received only 28% support, nearly 40%. The vote gap became the key to Trump's victory. American media generally believed that lower-class white people abandoned by mainstream society through this election, expressing their long-suppressed and ignored grievances. Then, what let these lower-class white people be gradually abandoned by mainstream society? Did they vote for the poor? What about Trump, who has never been a man? It's like side A and side B of the same problem. Combined efforts of individuals and society. Then can a noble son from a poor family appear? It is also the combined efforts of society and individuals. As a result, it is difficult for a poor family to produce a noble son. And let's start with Vance's own story. Listen to this hillbilly lament. First question we want to ask is, how much effort does a low-class white person have to put in to live a better life? Vance was born in Ohio, USA in 1984. Dilapidated steel town, Middletown City. If you could describe Vance's childhood in one word, that's about chouse. When he could just walk. Parents divorced. He lives with his mother and half-sister. Mother worked as a nurse, married 5 times. In life, keep cheating when the frequency of love is high. Change partners every few months. And temporary father after another, like a revolving lantern, flashes through the lives of Vance, and his sistroni of the months briefly brought Vance in. It's just that this kind of life never lasts long. Vance's mother was arrested for drinking and taking drugs after repeated love failures. His condition is getting worse. He often in a trance. He was rollerblading in the emergency room after taking drugs. So I lost my job. Also often beat and scolded the Vance siblings. It almost cost Vance his life once. At that time, when Vance was 12 years old, he was annoyed by a small thing. Mother was captured at that time driving on the highway, threatened to crash the guardrail with Vance. This incident ended with Vance calling the police and being captured. Ended by being sued by the court. In order not to be adopted by a strange family, Vance lied to the judge, but this incident has become Vance's nightmare forever. 20 years have passed. Often dreaming about running away, desperate to escape from an emotionally disturbed mother. From 9 to 16 years old, Vance moved 7 times with his mother. Originally, he had good grades, but the endless changes and quarrels at home let his grades get worse and worse. His temper is getting worse and worse. He also learned to smoke marijuana at my 4th. He grew into a cynical boy when encountering problems. I like to use my fists to solve them. He still thinks the problem lies with others. He hates that he can't wear designer clothes. He hates that I have to take the bus to go to school instead of taking the family car like other students. Not only hates his irresponsible parents, even hated grandpa who always supports and protects him because of his death. Let yourself lose your asylum. Vance's grandpa and grandma, although he is also from the countryside a bit, he gave Vance the best care he could and emotional support. If it weren't for them, Vance might have dropped out of school long ago or get addicted to drugs. Vance never had a decent father. It was his grandpa who taught him to do math problems. Tell him what a man should know. When grandma discovers that Vance has learned to smoke marijuana, he immediately took Vance to his home, encouraged him to study hard, teach him the value of labor. Grandma always told him life is a struggle. Don't be like those cowards. Feel that reality is not good for you. You can do whatever you want if the support of grandparents is like a safe haven. Let him take a breath. That really gave him the opportunity to pursue the American dream. It's the Marine Corps. After graduating from high school and the advice of my cousin, Vance decided to join the Army. First joined the U.S. Marine Corps. Military experience. Events changed both physically and mentally. Once upon a time, Vance was a fat boy, never ran a millithats to kilometers. Less than 4 years of devil training, easily won 3 miles in only 19 minutes. More importantly, rigorous training and management in the military tempered Vance's will. It also made him have a positive attitude. Vance used to be very pessimistic, just fragmented early life. Always give him a signal people like him not capable of living a better life. The fact is that they regard lack of ability and lack of effort as confused. He worked hard to complete each on a seemingly impossible challenge. Only later did he discover he underestimated himself. Own life. You can change yourself. In 2005, he went to the battlefield in Iraq with the army, became a media liaison officer. A little Iraqi boy he met gave him a great touche, gave the child a piece of ear. His earth child smiled happily. This made Vance realize, compared to children who have suffered from war misfortunes or injustices in his past, nothing. When Vance retired from the Marine Corps at age 23, he already knew it clearly. What kind of life do you want? And how to realize such a life after retirement. Went to college by working part-time with the best results, earned a double major at The Ohio State University. Then he entered the famous Yale University Law School. Study before graduation, he got an offer from a top law firm. 3 years at Yale, met a perfect life partner, works, gets married, and buys a house. Illogically, he lived the life of his dreams, but it was just 3 years at Yale make him realize, and the lower class white people like him so different from mainstream society. Law school, there are almost no people with similar family backgrounds to him. More than 95% of Yale Law School students from middle class and above. Most people are very rich. The annual income of a middle class family in the United States is about $160,000 United States dollars. The money was placed in Vance's. This is simply too many to count, but law students looking forward to getting this much salary in the first year. Some are still worried that they don't have enough money. The more important gap is not the wealth gap. Vance's law school classmates all have intact families, harmony and friendship among family members, and they are confident. Believe very much in your own judgment and abolition. And the lower class white people Vance knew, but no one has such confidence that they habitually feel you can't control your own life. Any decision you make will not affect your future life. The others succeeded. It depends on luck and talent. I've been too bad. It's all the fault of others, and the environmentalists consider this. It's called learned helplessness. Vance analyzes from himself learned helplessness. A lot of it comes from when he was a child. Family chaos feels like he can't control anything. Scary thing is family chaos is a vicious cycle of children living in changing environments, compared with children who live a stable life. It's easier to fall into an unstable cycle. When Vance's mother, Bev, was a child, family background is not bad. Steel industry in Middletown was booming at that time. Vance's grandfather worked at the steel company. The income is enough for the family to live a well-off life, but starting from Bev's account. The house is filled with the smell of gunpowder smoke. Grandpa was an alcoholic for 20 years, still chasing women outside with my grandma's brother. Grandma hates grandpa's infidelity. No more housework every day. He just think about revenge on my grandpa. Time. My grandfather ignored my grandmother's warning. Drunk again and passed out. Grandma actually brought a bucket of gasoline, poured it all over Earth, and he calmly struck a match and threw it on his chest. The little aunt, who was only 11 years old at the time, rushed out and put out the fire. This saved my grandpa's life. 3 children who grew up in such a turbulent family, one by one almost went astray. My uncle didn't graduate from high school. He joined a steel company as a worker. My little aunt dropped out of high school at the age of 16 to get married. Trapped in an abusive home. Bev was originally at her high school graduation ceremony, hundreds of students delivering a speech, but she gave birth to her daughter 2 months after graduation. Failed to go to university. She was divorced when she was 19, became a single mother until the year before Vance was born. Grandpa finally gave up his alcohol addiction, make peace with grandma. They started helping the children get out of trouble. They helped the little aunt get a divorce, pay nursing school tuition for Vance's mother, help him take care of the kid. Chaos begets chaos. Instability leads to instability. Vance's family is a portrayal of the family life of lower-class white Americans. Research shows children who have experienced multiple childhood traumas more likely to suffer from anxiety and depression. It is also more likely that an adult who unstable emotional relationship, and like Vance, a child from a poor family who has succeeded in upward mobility, escape from material poverty. It is also difficult to escape this spiritual poverty. This is in his intimate relationship with his wife. It is very obvious. He thinks his wife is radical and perfect, but I can't help but quarrel with him over trivial matters. Sometimes even walk out the door just like his mother did. This made him feel guilty and scared, afraid of becoming like my mother. There's nothing like being your own inner demon, and even more frightening. We do families have conflicts? Is it so common among lower-class white people? Why is it that a white man like him comes from a lower class? Very few among the American elite, we again, resulting in learned helplessness in them so that they can't escape poverty. This is also the second question we want to ask: reasons why rural people cannot escape poverty. First, social segregation and cultural difference. Ethical segregation refers to the relative segregation of residential and racial groups. Showed does social segregation rise? It's to read is necessary for us to understand the country people of whom Vance wrote. Here, lower class white people make a more precise definition. In the U.SW, white people can also be based on the birthplace of their ancestors, divided into many types. Vance and his family considered to be descendants of Scots-Irish. Their ancestors worked as then he worked as an electric farmer and coal miner. In more recent times, became a machinist and factory worker, again because most of them have not received higher education in American terms. They're redneck farmers or white trash. Vance's grandparents bought from the small town of Jackson, Kentucky. What about this small town is located in the Appalachian Mountains of the United States. There is a coal mining area there. In addition to farming, the locale's only option is to go to the coal mine. After World War I, industrial areas rise in the Midwest near the Great Lakes. Factories urgently need stable labor force. Encourage workers to bring their families to the north, work in factories in the Great Lakes region. Every Thanksgiving and Christmas, any southbound route in the Midwest and the road almost all Ohio cars with Indiana or Michigan. It's full of gifts and the country folk who went back to their hometown for the holidays. Vance's maternal grandparents were among this wave of immigrants. Made it to Middletown, Ohio, a once prosperous steel city. My grandfather worked for AMCO, the largest company in the area. From the 1940s to the 1960s, it was the most prosperous period of the entire Great Lakes industrial zone. Vance's grandparents, just like the tens of millions of country people who come to cities to work from poor farmers, become a blue-collar middle-class person who owns a car and a house by the mid-1970s. The oil crisis triggered the Great Recession in the United States. Plus, industrial structure upgrade Great Lakes manufacturing, its share in the national economy, has gradually declined. Government intervention manufacturing to the west and south and overseas after the industrial economy moves southward. Job opportunities in the Midwest are declining. Well-educated people, rich people, and people with connections all went to the south. The once prosperous industrial cities in the Great Lakes region, factories were abandoned, machines were covered with rust. This area was therefore called the Rust Belt. Most of those who stayed behind were not capable of working or too old. They were not suitable for working again. In addition, the value of real estate depreciated rapidly. It fell to the bottom. No one wanted to buy their houses. The cost of moving was too high. Those who were trapped were often the poorest. After the 1980s, Middleton's once busy shopping mall, restaurants and bars that had been in business for decades, large supermarkets quickly closed down, and large shopping malls closed down. The city center became a ruin. There were abandoned stores and broken windows everywhere. The main street where the rich once lived, at night, became a street for drug addicts and drug dealers. Poverty spread from the city center to the suburbs. More and more working-class whites lived in severely impoverished communities. In 1970, only 25% of white children live in communities where the poverty rate is above 10%. By 2000, that number had risen to 40%. It is certainly higher now. Of the freshmen in public high schools, 20% drop out before graduation. Most never get a college diploma. Almost no one goes to college outside of Ohio because during the week, college tuition is more than half cheaper. The situation is even worse in Appalachia. Nearly a third of the people in Jackson live in poverty, including about half of the children. Prescription drug addiction is rampant in the town. Dozens died of heroin overdoses in 2015. The local high school has had no students admitted to college for a long time. Economist Rod Chetty found that in the United States, poor children can rise to high school on their own merits. Probability there are very strong regional differences for poor children from the Rust Belt and Appalachian Mountains. It is the most difficult to realize their dreams and break through the class. He pointed out two important reasons. One is that there are many single-parent families here, and the other is that residential segregation is common due to the income gap between families. A direct consequence of residential segregation is that people cannot see signs that life will get better, and children cannot see examples of changing their fate through hard work. Poor people live together, and everyone's life is similar. Poverty, violence, drugs, and complex emotional relationships are rampant in such communities. Gradually, they have formed a concept that no matter what they do, people like them will not succeed. This is a reason for their learned helplessness. In addition, residential segregation cannot give the poor children the connections, resources, or social support necessary to break through isolation. This is a fact that Vance only understood after attending Yale Law School. Connections and social support a person has many times are more important than hard work and luck. He answered a key question incorrectly in an interview, thought he would lose the opportunity. But one of his referrals later called the company and praised him highly. In the end, Vance still got the job for lower-class white people. They had the opportunity to break residential segregation through the church, because the church is not based on residence, but on different branches of faith. Therefore, the church gathers people from different classes and races. When they encounter difficulties, the church can also provide them with help. For patients with alcohol dependence, he said that the church made them feel that they were not fighting alone. For pregnant single mothers, he could provide free housing, vocational training, and parenting classes. If anyone needed a job, friends in the church could either provide a job or help introduce someone. When Vance's biological father was in financial difficulties, church members even pooled money together to buy a used car for his family. However, apart from Vance's biological father, almost no one in his hometown who he knew went to church regularly. Protestants believed that people could be saved through faith in Christ without the help of the Pope or priests. Vance's family believed that religion was a personal belief and despised organized religion. Just now we talked about social segregation. The shift in the center of economic gravity has forced the lower-class white people in the Rust Belt to increasingly live with the poor. Living in isolation makes people unable to see the possibility of a better life. Children have no role models to learn from and cannot accumulate the social relationships necessary to get out of the bottom. However, Vance believes that when people talk about the white people at the bottom, they often only look for reasons from the economy, government, and society. But compared with these external factors, the country people should look for reasons from themselves. This is also what Vance wants to emphasize in writing this book. There is also a layer of cultural isolation between the country people and mainstream society. He isolates the deeds of the white people at the bottom, making them unwilling to take responsibility for their own lives and habitually blaming others for their failures. The cultural separation first comes from the country people's own culture of honor and escape culture. The Scottish-Irish country people, their descendants who came out of the Appalachian Mountains, have a strong sense of their family and homeland, loyalty and self-esteem. In order to defend the honor and dignity of the family or the individual, they would not hesitate to resort to violence. Vance called it the honor culture of the country people. After migrating to the city, the country people could not integrate well into the culture of the city people. The city requires people to abide by rules and order and solve problems with rational negotiation, not fists. When Vance's grandmother was 12 years old, she almost shot a cattle thief. After moving to the city, the middle-class housewives in the city often organized sewing groups and picnics, but he felt that he was out of place. So he simply hid at home and did not participate in these gatherings. Once they were offended by outsiders, they would resort to violence. Before Christmas one year, my grandfather took my grandmother and my uncle, who was still a child at the time, to a department store. The clerk was worried that my uncle would damage the expensive toys, so he would not let him take the toys. I heard that my grandfather's first reaction to this incident was to smash the toy to pieces in front of the clerk. My grandmother just picked up something from the shelf and threw it everywhere, shouting to beat him. Beat him! It's just like my grandmother always said, you can make a boy leave Kentucky, but you can't make Kentucky blood leave a boy's body. Country people keep their honor tradition wherever they go. Logically, such a group that values self-esteem and group honor should be responsible and have the courage to face problems. But on the contrary, when reality is very different from the morality they promote, in order to solve cognitive dissonance, they choose to avoid the problem, pretend that the problem does not exist, or make up lies to deceive themselves. When the family is in crisis, my grandfather chooses to drink alcohol, and my grandmother chooses to isolate herself. He no longer does housework, also puts outside. She moved the garbage home, stopped socializing with her neighbors, and had no way to talk about her suffering and seek help. Her grandmother became an evil witch in the eyes of the neighborhood children. She always had a cigarette in her mouth and a gun in her hand. Vance's mother explained why she took drugs. Once she said it was to escape the pressure of paying bills and relieve the pain of losing her grandfather. Another time, she said it was to escape the conflict between siblings. Making up lies and deceiving oneself is another way to cover up one's own problems. A report published by The Economist pointed out that the white working class works longer hours than highly educated white people. But Vance believes this conclusion is incorrect, because the survey results were obtained by phone and country people always like to brag. Middleton, 30% of young people work no more than a week 20 hours, but everyone likes to mention diligence events. Has a neighbor has never left the government's assistance in his life, but he always likes to boast about his diligence. He said that there are too many people taking advantage of the existing system. Those hardworking people don't get the help they need. Should think that most of the beneficiaries in the system are swindlers, but he is an exception. Overemphasis on honor and self-deception let them always overestimate or underestimate themselves, glorify the good aspects and turn a blind eye to the bad aspects. This also brings another consequence of the habitually feel that they are powerless, others succeed because they fail. But it is someone else's fault. It is what we said before. Learn helplessness. Vance tells a story about a colleague in the book. In the summer when he was preparing to enter Yale Law School, Vance worked in a floor tile company. Working in the company, the job is to drive a bulldozer to move floor tiles. The hourly wage for this job is $13. When there is a shortage of manpower, it can be as high as $16. The annual salary of ordinary employees is $32,000. Which is higher than that of a poor county of an American family. There is also good medical insurance. He has a 19-year-old colleague. Bob's girlfriend was pregnant at the time. The company also arranged a job for his girlfriend to answer the phone. But he and his girlfriend were both fired because of their passive resistance. Bob was chronically late. He had to go to the bathroom 3 or 4 times a day. And each time he went, it would take more than half an hour. His girlfriend would skip work every 2 days and never give advance notice. When he was fired, Bob yelled at the manager, "How could you do this to me? Don't you know I have a pregnant girlfriend?" Vance found that the economic downturn did make people without a college degree feel uncomfortable. It is more difficult for people to find intellectual jobs, but no one wants to do physical jobs with high salaries and good benefits. It is not just the younger generation who are unwilling to work hard. An old acquaintance of his quit because he couldn't stand getting up early, but complained on Facebook that Obama's economic policies seriously affected his life. Even if a countryman wants to work hard, he will find that the cultural gap with mainstream society is also creating problems for them. After Vance entered Yale Law School, he found that the rules of this world were completely different from the world he was in. He didn't know that he had to wear formal clothes and leather shoes for interviews. People don't find jobs by submitting resumes. They just need to build a good network of contacts to easily get an offer. The interview at the law firm is not at the company, but at a cocktail party, facing a row of 9 utensils, 3 forks and several knives. He felt like a fool because he didn't know which fork to use or which dish to eat. He didn't know the difference between water and soda water and couldn't order white wine. The whole high-end banquet hall looked like a place to make fun of the poor. Vance could only secretly call his middle-class girlfriend for help to avoid making a fool of himself. The increasingly obvious social and cultural divisions and the resulting learned helplessness have plunged the lower-class white people in the United States into poverty and alienated them from mainstream society. They didn't believe that they had the ability to change their lives. They couldn't see the subjective initiative of human beings in them and couldn't see any deeds. They had already given up on their lives. The well-known research organization Pew Research Center, a research report from the center shows that the white working class, the most pessimistic group in the United States, only 44% of the white working class expect their children to live better than them in terms of material. This proportion is lower than that of the poor black group with worse economic prospects and Latino immigrants. This is why these lower-class whites hate Obama, because Obama represents the American dream they don't want to believe in. They can't see the hard work Obama has put in to achieve his current achievements. They only think that he is a genius with good luck. The fact is different from what they think. They would rather believe in conspiracy theories than the media. The book Hillbilly Elegy says that Vance graduated from Yale Law School and became a judicial assistant. He didn't mention Trump in the book, but this book helped the United States mainstream media and elites understand why Trump won the presidential election. Vance said in an interview with the media that the reason why the lower-class white people voted for Trump is because they completely distrust the political elites and the mainstream media, as well as their anxiety and despair about real life. Trump saw their anxiety and promised to create more jobs. His angry and cynical attitude during the campaign also catered to the mentality of these lower-class white people and wrote this song of rural tragedy. Vance does not think that rural people deserve special sympathy. On the contrary, what they need to do is to ask themselves whether our lives are good or bad. To what extent is it attributed to environmental injustice or family misfortune? And to what extent it depends on your personal decision. Vance's extraordinary courage and profound analysis of the achievement of scraping the bone to heal the wound. This is a great book. However, his analysis of the learned helplessness of the country people has attracted criticism from people with similar experiences in Kentucky, Ohio, and other places. They do not deny the despair of the country people. but they also believe that the lives of the lower-class white people are full of difficulties. The current crisis is enough for them to cope with. They have no chance to plan for the future. Most of them are not as lazy as Vance said. They have jobs, but do not get good pay. We listen to good books every day. I have interpreted the book My Life at the Bottom. Its author Barbara Ehrenreich has personally experienced that many people cannot support themselves even if they work two jobs. Personal ambition is important, but help from the outside is also indispensable. Vance obviously listened to these criticisms. 6 months after the publication of the Elegy of the Country People, he moved back to Ohio in early 2017. In 1996, he founded a nonprofit called Renewer Ohio, which is dedicated to dealing with Ohio's opioid crisis and providing high-quality and learning jobs to Ohio locals. Currently, he is a partner in an investment firm called Revolution, which mainly invests in new ecological enterprises to help develop other parts of the United States outside California, New York, and Massachusetts. Obviously, he also knows that the Matthew effect of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer does exist. Compared with the core areas where capital is concentrated, places with fewer opportunities and resources need more capital and talent injections. There is a contradiction in Hillbilly Elegy that Vance praises his family on the one hand and sells them out on the other, treating them as strangers to facilitate his own questionable arguments. The reason for saying questionable is that it is now clear that he doubts the argument that the American working class is responsible for its troubles, or at least finds it politically unusable. He now prefers to blame China, NAFTA, Mexico, and certain companies, as well as the political and cultural establishment he once determined to join. In other words, he has turned his back on his most loyal readers.
Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.